I want to move on now to something that I don't usually do, but my boys Russ and Keaton on Due Dissidence have been going at Darryl Cooper since the Tucker Carlson interview came out, where he kind of said that he thought Churchill was a bad guy in World War II. So the immediate response of the media at large is like, wow, this guy is a terrible person and a white supremacist, and what they typically do to anyone who kind of deviates a little bit from the norm or the popular narrative. And I'm a little disappointed in the Due Dissidence guys, but we're never going to agree 100% on everything. And I'm not going to like unfollow them or like, send nasty notes to them, because it seems like what happened with them is, they voiced an opinion that they had, and a bunch of dipshits online came at them as like with anti-Semite type rhetoric. And I mean, I even think that's an op. Like, I think the people that are like claiming to back Darryl Cooper that are coming out and like saying bad stuff about the Jews are an op. They're probably Sally Albright's bots. Now, I haven't gone out and like collected the data to prove that. But when this kind of shit happens, that's usually part of the whole, the whole game, and you see it now. Trump said something during the debate about people eating dogs, and now there's white supremacists marching in Ohio, aka feds, to kind of drive home the point. Look, see, he's a racist. Look at all these people that are doing things now because he said something about dogs. Oh my God, the world is ending and you must vote for the status quo, because if you don't, we're all going to collectively cry for 4 years, which is, honestly kind of why I would like to see Trump win, is just so I can listen to people like, Dana Bash and Rachel Maddow clutch their pearls and cry for 4 years, because, it's not like Trump is that verifiably different from the Democrats that much else will change. So at least I'll take a perverse pleasure in listening to people I hate, well-documented liars. I don't hate them because, of anything other than the fact that they're very disingenuous, openly dishonest liars. Anyway, getting back to the crux of this, let me play you just a little bit of the Due Dissidence clip that I'm talking about so you can kind of hear where they're coming to start. So, and I mean, listen, they do have some valid points, but let's get into it here. So here's just kind of the genesis of all this.
Sort of budding violent confrontations between nationalists and the police and so forth, which, I think our natural, we like order, right?
Yeah.
Like Europeans, we like order, and we see things.
Okay. Right there. So a lot of what he says are dog whistles that they don't dwell on. They just kind of run right past. But take a second and listen to what he's saying. Europeans like order as opposed to who? As opposed to who?
So this is what I don't like, and so Russ is reading stuff into what this guy's saying. If the guy, like, I'm going to take the guy at his word, unless the guy comes out and says, hey, guess what? I'm a Nazi. I love Hitler. He's awesome. Kanye did that. Do you think Kanye's a Nazi? I mean, but also they've been saying Tucker Carlson is a white supremacist for years, and I've seen zero evidence that proves that. There's zero. Like this right here. This is the jump Russ is making. Well, he said that Europeans like order, so that means, as opposed to who? That means he's a racist Nazi, because he's basically, because he said Europeans like order, that means that other people don't. And I wish that these guys, rather than kind of knee-jerk jumping on this guy's a Nazi train with the rest of the pearl clutching shit libs in the media, would have said, you know what, we're going to invite this guy on the show and we're going to ask him questions about, what did you mean by this? When you said Europeans like order, did you mean only Europeans like order? I mean, that's a jump you have to make to be like, oh, this guy's a total racist. But let's listen to a little more of this.
People who are not European, right? I mean, he's creating a contrast inherently with that framing. Europeans like order. So black people don't like order. Yellow people don't like order. Brown people don't like order.
But again, Russ, he didn't say that. You're saying that. He just said Europeans like order. That, I mean, you have to view that as a racist statement to make this jump. And, maybe he is. I'm not saying that I 100% know that he's not secretly a Nazi. What I'm saying is I think it's disingenuous and unfair to just hang something like that around someone's neck when there's no real evidence for it. So far, just to recap here, this is like the silver bullet that he said Europeans like order, that he's a Nazi. So he's a Nazi because he said Europeans like order.
We uniquely like order. So now you're starting to get to the heart of what Darryl Cooper's worldview is. And the reason, they say you know a tree by its fruit. At least half of the pushback we got on our segment were just straight out anti-Semitic, just straight out Jew. Oh, not surprising. Jews would think that. Well, I mean, so why are people like that attracted to Darryl Cooper? Because he's saying things like this.
Also, because the fucking people who run the bot networks online want you to believe that those type of people are his followers. I mean, we've seen this time and time again, Russ, man. I'm really disappointed that you're not coming at this from more of a skeptical angle. But again, let's listen a little bit more.
He's saying things like this. In the end, he is putting out a lot of innuendo that is in the family of traditional Ku Klux Klan, neo-Nazi, neo-Confederate, Western chauvinist kind of ideology. If it did not appeal to people like that, we wouldn't be hearing things like that.
So the term Western chauvinist, okay, I will give that to Russ. This guy is, and they bring this up in this kind of conversation. He worked for the State Department or something like that. He's definitely got Fed energy. I wouldn't even deny that. But the idea that he's a racist, come on. I mean, you have to understand too, Russ, when you're saying, oh, the stuff he's saying is in dog whistle, it's in the family of stuff that's KKK or, Confederate. For years, Russ, for years and years, anyone who challenged the establishment has been lumped into this genre of thought. And this is the jump that they have to make. They did this to Ron Paul when he was running in the primary. And I remember it well because I'm friends with a guy who used to work for the Clintons. He was a Clinton lawyer. I mean, we're not very close anymore. We worked together, but I remember posting. I think he unfriended me on Facebook. But I remember talking about this with him when Ron Paul was running, and he's like, "Well, Ron Paul's a white supremacist, and he runs with all these racists and stuff like that." By that dynamic, I mean anyone. You can tie anyone to someone else's actions, And to me, it's like, okay, but Ron Paul might have had people in his. It was something like he had a newsletter with someone that had said racist stuff or whatever. And it's like, once you start making those jumps, you're like, oh, well, this guy associates with this person, so therefore he is those people. Yeah, you can tell a lot about people by who they associate with, but that doesn't mean they're guilty of that person's crimes. And especially in this day and age, I take people at their word directly because everything is a goddamn smear campaign. But let's listen to just a little more of this before we jump into some other pieces
of Cooper.
Yeah, it's also just once again a straw man and very deceptively reductive when he says people who think Churchill is a hero are very happy with the way London looks now. He's making the globalism versus nationalism framing.
Exactly.
And he's also...
And that framing... globalism versus nationalism. I don't know if you guys have noticed this, but the attack on nationalism or people wanting to have sovereignty in their country is those people are racists. Make America great again. That's racist. They're going back to the people that want have U.S. sovereignty. I'm not a conservative and I never have been, but I understand now, especially now, the mindset of a conservative that's trying to keep some element of what the United States was or is in place, and you can't ever completely fight being part of a global economy. It's part of being a part of the world, but this idea that we should just allow the United States original values and the things that kind of made us a good country deteriorate, is racist. And this has always been the framing with anyone who, from the 90s. Glenn Greenwald did a great piece about how the Clinton era, they started this whole mentality about domestic terrorists, and anyone who's like kind of against the status quo is a domestic terrorist, a racist, a white supremacist. So this is a very ingrained thought process. So I'm not gonna keep going with Keaton and Russ. I love these guys, but I do think that they're wrong about this particular issue. So I'm going to jump over to a conversation that Dave Smith had with Darryl Cooper, and he just kind of addresses some of this stuff. So here's the first piece.
And he reinforced it and said he's not exaggerating. In 30 years in media and being at the center of a million controversies, he's never seen anything like this. So no, I definitely didn't anticipate that. I didn't even know we were going to talk about World War II is the funny thing. So I did.
So already it's looking like there is a wave of pushback against something that this guy said. And instantly they're going to call him a racist and do everything they can to make sure that no one listens to what he has to say. And instantly just dismisses. This is how people get dismissed from the conversation. And again, I have not seen any verifiable evidence that this guy is a Nazi, other than, like I just showed you, Russ making that kind of emotional jump from, well, he said that Europeans like order. What does he mean by that? I mean, I take it he means Europeans like order. That doesn't mean that because he thinks that Chinese people don't. Chinese people clearly like order. Look at their country. Anyway, let's listen to this.
I would have been more prepared and probably made my case a little bit more clearly. But if anything, I would have thought that our conversation about, the ongoing population replacement of European countries and how, any monarch in the past that would even imagine that he could do something like that would end up with their heads cut off. I would have thought that might have generated a little more controversy. But I mean, it's worth, it really is worth asking, like, why this particular thing did, because that really got to the heart of what Tucker and I were talking about. My comments about Churchill were, as I said in the interview, like kind of hyperbolic and provocative. I was repeating something I had said to my buddy Jocko, and I told him I did it to provoke him, be hyperbolic, right? But the real thrust of the conversation was why is it that this particular issue, World War II, is, as we saw this last week, it is the third rail. It is the untouchable, absolute landmine that you have to stay away from, And I think that that's gotten more intense, not less, as the internet has opened up discourse, and as the narrative has started to kind of splinter and the few sources that are used to being able to control it have begun to lose control of it. They're throwing kind of ever more intense tantrums,
So I think the thing that kind of disappointed me most about Russ and Keaton's take on this too is Keaton kind of proudly was like, I'm not going to listen to what that guy has to say. I'm just going to call him a Nazi and move on. I'm just going to dismiss him as a pro-Nazi, pro-Hitler guy and completely move on to the next thing, because, and again, they can have their opinion. I'm not going to stop listening to Due Dissidence. I love these guys. I think they're great. But I do want to, when this kind of stuff happens, I think it's worthwhile to examine it closely. And because as political, people and former Bernie people as a whole, the goal is to make things happen, to enact positive change. And we're never going to do that if we're constantly drawing lines in the sand and standing on different sides of them and pointing at each other and calling, you're a communist, you're a Nazi. it doesn't make any sense unless there's real valid reason to, to believe that. And I just don't see it with this guy. He did an entire piece breaking down the Israel thing that's kind of like showing the Palestinian cause in a positive light, or at least in a light that people can relate to, and would a Nazi do that? Anyway. This is where he kind of describes the whole "you're supporting Hitler" thing.
The clip that Pierce Morgan is playing me to get you. I'm like, but what about that part in the clip where he just said, I'm being hyperbolic, or I'm not? You'd assume if I'm criticizing Churchill, that means I must be supporting Hitler. But of course, I'm not supporting Hitler. And they go, this guy's supporting Hitler. And you're like, is everybody just so hysterical that they're incapable of listening to what was actually said, even when they're playing the clip on their show? It's just really wild.
Well, if you think about like what a symbol is, right? Like Adolf Hitler was a person.
So this is good. I think this is probably one of the best things he kind of says in response to this controversy.
He was a leader of Germany, in the 30s and 40s. To us, what he is he's a symbol, right? The Holocaust is a symbol, just like the cross and God and the devil, whatever their external reality and grounding in the real world. To us, they're symbols. Like that's how they activate for us. And so, like what does that mean? Like a symbol is like an image that is implanted like deep in our subconscious by the culture at a very early age, that is attached to and meant to activate like a whole constellation of feelings and emotions and reactions and responses, and every society, this is how societies bind themselves together. They use symbols to do it, right? Like when you see people get super, super angry and worked up over somebody desecrating the flag, part of that is because that symbol's lodged in there, and all of those hostile responses are sort of, that's what's meant to be evoked by something like that. But also it's because on some ground level, like people have some idea, even if they're not thinking about it consciously, that if everybody starts kind of moving to a place where we don't care that the flag is being desecrated, that we're going to come apart in certain ways. Certain things are going to come apart that we all sort of rely on, even if that's not like really elucidated, clearly in people's minds. And I think that when you look at World War II, it's very much like that. Like people have this, from a very, very early age, literally elementary school, like it is put in your head that this is different. This is not really a historical event. This is a sort of world historical mythological event. And I don't say myth to mean that it's false or a lie, but in this symbolic sense, right? That it plays in the culture. Like I told Tom yesterday.
So the point he's making here is a very good one. And it's the point that this is like religion. He uses the term mythology, and he says, I'm not saying that it's a lie, but it's an event that has been mythologized in our psyches, like religion. So anyone who questions the rock solid foundational narrative that our society is built around is a bad person, and that is why there was such a visceral reaction to him, saying some stuff that people don't want to hear. People don't want to take, our entire rationale for the things we've done in the world since World War II. And I make this point all the time. Name a war since World War II where the U.S. was the good guy. Can you? Put it in the chat if you can, because I'll most likely be able to debate you on it. But that's the point. Again, this is a thing. This is an issue that has been religiousized, exactly like what was done during the pandemic recently, where all of a sudden you can't question the authorities, because if you do, you're a white supremacist, anti-vaxxer, pro-Trump, ready to overthrow democracy person. And it all started with this. And I think, we're going to get into one of the proofs, which I think is a little iffy in just a second, but let me let him finish his point here.
Like it's a load bearing story, right? There's a lot that rests on this particular story being just in this way. And even if people, don't have, even if they're not, if sort of breaking this down to themselves, like consciously in their minds, like they have an idea that if we start to question this particular story, if we start to pick it apart and look at it critically, because symbols, symbols never hold up to like endless critical analysis. I mean, that's one of the problems like that we run into in post-modernity, right? You can do that with everything. And so I'm not like saying these things are bad, they're necessary. But you have to look at the functions that they're actually serving. And if you look at the functions that the World War II myth has at least, has come to serve, surely some things, are solid. It definitely ingrained in the Western world, like in people from a very early age in a way that was probably never possible before, a sort of visceral reaction against group hatred based on, race and things like that. I mean, when you really think about like people today and people, if you just go back any time in human history, 100 years ago, like the level of just innate tolerance in your average American, it's unbelievable. I mean, it's truly unbelievable that transformation didn't happen over centuries. It happened really over the course of a generation or two. And the World War II story being so central to, the order we're living in is a big part of it, And so that's good. That's great. But then also,
that sounds like a Nazi to me.
Dann tritt für mich ein, so wie ich für dich eingetreten bin.
World War II has been used to essentially justify the U.S. global order, the U.S. empire, if you want to call it that. It's been used to sort of justify the special status and privileges that are accorded to the state of Israel.
Anti-Semitism.
Sort of place it above the critical evaluation and standards that we would expect above Western democratic nations, things like that.
Anti-Semitism.
And even you mentioned democracy, like Hans Hermann Hoppe. Democracy is one of those symbols too, and that's why people got triggered when they read that book. Is that symbol was triggered, and the cascade of emotions and everything else just overwhelmed the fact that he was, everything else he said.
So anyway, that's the kind of the point that I wanted to share that he made there about the utility of World War II and why people react so hard to it, being criticized.
Really brag about is that we beat the racists and the Nazis. They haven't put up a W since then. And so now every villain has to be one of those two things. You're either a racist or a Nazi. It's all kind of perfectly works out.
Did you catch that, guys?
Dann tritt für mich ein, so wie ich für dich eingetreten bin.
Yeah, I mean, and those are the prime evils of this regime, right? And again, to point that out is not to say that they're not evils. It's just, in our society, people, and I'm sorry you had to answer for this on Piers Morgan, but I put out a tweet right after the Paris Olympics ceremony.
So this is where he talks about his tweet, his problematic tweet.
Money at the big, the Last Supper thing, where I posted a picture of Hitler and his boys walking in front of the Eiffel Tower, and I posted a picture of that Last Supper desecration. And I said that the outcome of the picture on the right was preferable to the one on the left, or something like that, which I took down after a few people who I trust to tell me when I'm out of bounds, like, let me know that they thought I was. But I told them, like, the reason that I did that is I was like outraged by what I was watching at the Paris Olympics, and I was reaching for the most extreme example possible to show to express my outrage about this. And in our society, it's not the devil. If I would have posted a picture of Satan, like looming over the Eiffel Tower, and said that this is better than that, nobody would even got it. It would.
So basically, his tweet was him being triggered by the Paris Olympics thing, which I think is absolutely stupid to begin with. First of all, it's France, so let France be France. But second of all, this idea that it was somehow like a mockery of the Last Supper or something, and then that's like some kind of like sacred thing. He he just got in trouble for slaughtering a sacred cow when it comes to the World War II Winston Churchill thing. And now he's kind of mad that someone else slaughtered a sacred cow that he finds sacred, which is the Christianity thing. Now, you can say what he tweeted out was, pro-Nazi or whatever. I mean, I think it was just him being triggered, and he kind of explains that was the case. He was triggered by the Paris Olympics thing, and so he was trying to be provocative again. And again, Kanye does this kind of shit. There are people that do it, I think, that are not racist, but it's going to create a certain amount of vitriol when you slaughter a sacred cow like that. I think in the case of the Olympics thing, I don't even think that was their intention necessarily, but the fact that religious people were so upset by it, I think they were happy about that, So anyway, this tweet that he did here, again, is probably the most credible evidence that he's a Nazi, and I don't think that it's credible at all.
Wouldn't have landed at all because Hitler's the devil and the Nazis are the legions of hell. And, in Germany, like that's it. Every society has a heaven and hell. Every society has a God and a devil. And, and they don't have to think of it that way. They don't necessarily it may be in totally different terms. It may be in secular terms. It may be in mythological terms that divide up God into many and devil, the devil into many, evil spirit, whatever it is. But we've all got those. Like, it's just, it's a basic structure of the human mind. And in our society, that's it's one of the reasons I'm really convinced that there's always been just as there's like an extreme focus and fascination with World War II and the Holocaust on the side of, you have to treat it as this sacred thing and treat it differently from everything else and don't be critical about it. There's also, on the other side, there's always just been this undercurrent somewhere, even if it's just, a punk rock thing, or today it's like an online thing or whatever of positive fascination with Hitler and the Nazis. And my way of looking at that is every generation has its devil worshippers. And not all of them are serious. Like the people who would say that, I'm a Satanist, a lot of times they're just trolls or whatever. But the devil is always going to attract a certain amount of attention from both directions, and so when you take a historical event like that and elevate it to that level and make it a myth, you're always going to have two sides of that, two extreme reactions to doing that.
So there you have it. And just to kind of close this out, this is the mainstream brunch liberal take on this I happened to see this morning. This historian got internet famous as a big lie apologist. Now he's defending Nazis. In 2021, Darryl Cooper went viral with a thread blaming the media for MAGA boomers' belief in Trump's election fraud lies. So the profile of right-wing podcaster Darryl Cooper, a.k.a. Martyrmade, got an unfortunate boost this week thanks to an already infamous appearance on Tucker Carlson's podcast. As of this writing, the Martyrmade podcast is the top-ranked show on iTunes, ahead of the New York Times Daily, the Joe Rogan. That was short-lived, as Russ and Keaton outlined. And it was almost kind of like they were gleeful about it. Like, we called this guy a Nazi, and now he's not number one anymore. And it's like, okay, good.
Dann tritt für mich ein, so wie ich für dich eingetreten bin.
I'm glad that people like Russ and Keaton have the audience they do, because 99.9% of the issues, they are 100% correct on them. This is one of the issues I think they might be a little bit out of their depth on. And I think that what they should have done, rather than just calling Cooper a Nazi, is invited him on the show and asked him the questions that they're, kind of positing here. Anyway. He's got over 250,000 followers on X. His sit down with Carlson was even boosted by Elon Musk, who later quietly deleted his supportive post. Cooper counts Republican vice presidential nominee J.D. Vance among his X followers. Among new right influencers, Cooper is kind of a big deal. Carlson praised Cooper as the best and most honest popular historian in the United States and lauded his work on the forbidden topic of trying to understand World War II. Putting aside the abject silliness of saying World War II is a forbidden subject anywhere on this planet, he didn't say that. He said criticizing the popular narrative on any level, or looking past the idea that, you know, we were all just the good guys and they were all just the bad guys, and kind of like looking into the nuance of that. No one is saying that, oh, it's okay what they did. You know, no one is justifying it. But as we've seen in recent days, you know, there's a lot more. History is written by the winners. And so it's good to, like, if you've ever read a book like The People's History of the United States, for example, there are counter narratives in that book to what you learn in a high school or college history class, because history is written by the winners. So there is validity in going into the weeds with this stuff and unraveling some of these narratives a little bit. Unless you're a knee-jerk, you know, brunch liberal. Just asking questions style of ahistorical revisionism, which frequently includes Nazi apologia and Holocaust skepticism. He called Winston Churchill the chief villain of World War II and said that the murder of 6 million Jews was humane because there was no food to feed the prisoners of war. So if you'll notice here too, the way that they word these articles, this word is in quotes and this word is in quotes because that's not what he said. He did say this, that's in quotes, but there's no context around it. You know, their job is to gin up outrage for the Democrats against anyone who is threatening to the status quo. These sentiments are hardly uncommon in Cooper's output. In a since deleted tweet from July, Cooper posted 2 photos. One was of Adolf Hitler and his high command stalking through Paris with the Eiffel Tower in the background. The other was of a drag performers in the Paris Olympics opening ceremony who appeared on the TV broadcast for mere moments. Cooper wrote that the Nazi Victory Lap photo was infinitely preferable in virtually every way to the Olympics photo, and there's no reason to believe this was mere trolling. If I'm giving him the benefit of the doubt, he was trying to say that when society gets to a point where it's like that, basically, you know, degenerated, people, you know, are going to vote for something to stop that. You know, and that's largely probably how the Nazis rose to power. I mean, it is how they rose to power. Everything was shit in Germany. So it was easy for someone like Hitler to come in and blame people for those problems. So no one's reading that into it. They're just like, this guy's a Nazi who somehow also like wrote a thing, you know, did an entire piece unraveling the Israel thing and kind of like painting the Palestinian movement in a more favorable light than it's ever been painted to people on the right. And I think this, again, is a reason why this is happening. He's a Nazi because he's not all in on the Israel narrative or this narrative either. And this is an easier one to attack him on because, as he said, this is mythologized in the minds of Americans as this thing that you can't question. And we were the good guys and that's it. Pretty gross, right? This is MSM. Pretty gross, right? So where did this guy come from? How did he cultivate such a large audience? Oh my God, pretty gross. It's so gross. It all started with the long Twitter thread back on July 2021, in which Cooper created, sorry, discussions with the gross. So gross. Oh my God, that's so gross. Discussions were with enough boomer tier Trump supporters who believe the 2020 election was fraudulent. For his ability to extract a general theory about their perspective in dozens of tweets, Cooper purported to explain that the reasons that tens of millions of Americans believe Trump's thoroughly and decisively debunked big lie. In short, he claimed it's all the mainstream media and institutions' fault. Trump-supporting boomers can't be expected to have agency, nor can they be blamed for believing grifters and media scam artists selling them conspiracy theories. In Cooper's telling, they are mere victims in a grand conspiracy to mislead the public, and therefore can't be blamed for latching on to Trump's craven democracy-assaulting lie. So, I mean, just this paragraph on its own is a hodgepodge of brunch liberal. Oh my God, that's so gross. It's no, the reason people believe Trump's lie is because people like MSNBC are full of horse shit that they spew. They just spent months saying that Joe Biden was like good to go. And I just showed you a clip of him, you know, introducing Zelensky as President Putin. According to Cooper, the behavior of the corporate press is really what radicalized them. They hate journalists more than they hate any politician or government official because they feel most betrayed by them. MSNBC actually, you know, delivering the truth here. You know, they're of course saying it's bullshit, but he's 100% right about that. And now you see why there is such a, you know, ginned up outrage about this guy because of this type of stuff, you know, because he's telling the media what they don't want to hear. The behavior of the corporate press is really what radicalized Trump supporters. They hate journalists more than they hate any politician or government official because they feel the most betrayed by them because you guys are liars. The thread continued with vague innuendos and a gish gallop. A gish gallop? What does that even mean? Of semi-relevant information. A gish gallop. Oh my God, it's so gross. And it had a gish gallop of semi-relevant information. Did Nina Jankowicz write this? But at no time did it put any responsibility at the feet of Trump, Carlson, or any of the other grifters and media scam artists who brain poisoned their followers with an entirely false narrative that most of them believe to this day. Sounds like someone I know, MSNBC.
This version of Biden, intellectually, analytically, is the best Biden ever.
He is sharp, intensely probing, and detail-oriented and focused.
Cooper's thread went viral thanks to endorsement by numerous high-profile MAGA influencers like Donald Trump Jr. as well as fellow travelers. Oh my God, so gross. They're so gross. So you get the idea. There is a concerted effort to make anyone who questions the approved narratives into a racist. And,
Anti-Semitism.
You know, I wish that Keaton and Russ would have just, rather than jumping to this like, well, he's clearly a Nazi thing.
Anti-Semitism.
They're smarter than that. They should have invited him on the show and asked him the questions directly that they have.
Anti-Semitism.
Gotten thorough answers like Dave Smith did. I mean, Dave Smith
Anti-Semitism
is also Jewish and, you know, is clearly not
Anti-Semitism.
part of this brunch liberal zombie cult that, you know, anyone who questions anything is immediately a right-wing grifter, racist,
Anti-Semitism,
dog whistle, whatever you want to say. So